So we are going to talk about the 4 food tests that you need to be familiar with. This is from chapter 4, the digestion chapter. Okay. And the first one is probably the most straightforward. That is the test for starch. Okay. Most of you seemed familiar with this. The test for starch is simply that you add iodine on a bit of food, or we also talked about it in the context of plants, right? That you have to stain the leaf for starch, then you would use the iodine. That's the last step of a multi-step process. When you're talking about food, usually you literally just add some iodine, a few drops of iodine, and on the food, and then you look for the color change. And the color change is that originally the iodine is kind of a brown or rust red, and it's going to change to a very dark blue, which is called blue black, if starch is present. We'll say if positive. Okay, so that's the first one. The second food test is for glucose. All right, and glucose, again, several of you already knew this. It's for you use the reagent Benedict's solution, or sometimes called Benedict's reagent. And so Benedict's solution, we would have talked about this with question 7 in the mock exam from paper 2, which you guys, it wasn't on your test, but we went through it. So Benedict's solution is originally a blue, and then it turns anywhere from green, it can be yellow, orange, or if there's lots of glucose around, you'll get a brick red. Okay, and so it's kind of a spectrum. The closer you are to the red, the more glucose there is present. But the key thing about this is that it's not enough to just add the Benedict solution. You have to add it and then you have to heat it up. So this color change, what you're actually doing is you're reducing some copper sulfate ions, but this color change doesn't happen without the addition of heat. Okay, so when you're talking about this, you also want to think about that if you're doing multiple samples, right, then you would want to make sure that you're heating them all up to the same temperature for the same amount of time. If you're looking to compare how much glucose is present, you're using the same volume of the Benedict solution. Things like that are what you would want to control. Right. The third test is for protein. And the test for protein, you use something called burette solution. Okay. There are 2 separate components of this, but you don't need to use both. You can literally just combine them together and add burette solution, right? Um, and so what you're looking for is a purple color, actually. So sorry, the original color here is a blue. This is kind of a teal blue. This is a darker blue, but it doesn't matter. Just call it blue. And what you're looking for, if the protein is present, then you'll end up with a purple color. And you don't need to heat this up or anything. It's literally just an addition. But it does need to. It usually needs to be in liquid form. So again, you want to think about the volume of the liquids that you're adding. Right. The third test is for lipids, and there are actually several ways to do this. But the easiest way to do it is that you add a little bit of ethanol or some sort of alcohol. Okay, and then you look for and originally the ethanol on your sample as well might be clear, but it's going to be, you're going to end up with a cloudy layer that sits on top. All right, and the reason that you're doing that, top, the idea is that lipids don't dissolve in water, right? They're not water soluble. You know this if you've ever tried to put oil in water and mix it up, it doesn't work very well. Okay, and so that's what a lipid is. And so the idea is that lipids don't dissolve in water, but they do dissolve in ethanol. And so when you dissolve it, then you get all of the lipids that in the ethanol, and that forms a cloudy layer on top of the water or the liquid that you already have there. All right. And the cloudy layer that you're looking at is actually, um, it's not clear, right? I mean, it's cloudy, you can't see through it, but that means it's actually what it is it's an emulsion of lipids, which might sound familiar from if you remember what bile does in the digestive system. And the same thing, it's worth mentioning up here that the Benedict solution, what you're actually looking at here is, it's again, it looks like that but it's actually a precipitate, which is again, it's a solid thing that falls out of solution. And that's because the copper sulfate ions are When they get reduced, they fall out of solution. So that's actually a brick red or precipitate, technically, is what you're looking for. But usually they don't. They're not looking for that level of detail at the iGCSE level.